Hey YouTube, it's Investor Z34. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to your source of no BS 370Z content. Today we're going to be talking about kind of a sensitive subject. We're going to be talking about the top 10 issues with the 370Z platform. The reason why I'm making this video is to call out and clarify issues that are kind of surrounding the 370Z platform in one consolidated video. And in each of these issues I'm going to bring up, I'm going to talk through them individually. Although this may kind of sound like an attack on the fantastic car that is the 370Z in my opinion, I think it's important to put this information out there so that there's no surprises that come up whenever you decide to pull the trigger or even not. Most importantly, my goal is to keep your ownership costs down, and that's what we'll explore in this video today. As a friendly reminder, these videos do take time, money, and effort. So any support you can give me by liking and subscribing to my channel would be greatly appreciated. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the top 10 common issues with the 370Z. Okay, so as I'm stepping through this video today, just something to keep in mind, I'm going to be referencing a lot of solutions for normal 370Z issues that have been basically tried and tested, and these are sold by Z1 Motorsports. So Z1 Motorsports is not paying me or doing anything for me to basically promote their business. I have given them a fair amount of my own business for my Z, and I'm just going to go ahead and reference a lot of fixes that they have out there and a lot of aftermarket parts that basically solve a majority of these issues that you might experience owning a 370Z. So once again, just putting this out there, I'm not paid by Z1 Motorsports. I do like them. I do like their customer service, and I have been a satisfied customer. So that being said, I'm going to promote their business today for them free of charge. The first issue I want to go ahead and talk about with the 370Z platform is the paint is weak, and you should be expecting rock chips. Now this is a pretty common issue with sports cars, but the Z that I have has picked up a ton of rock chips ever since I've owned the car, especially on the bumper and even on the roof. So even though the paint itself, when clean, polished, and waxed, looks really nice, especially in the pearl white like I have, its durability, I'm sorry to say, is probably the worst I've ever experienced in vehicle ownership. Another issue I'm going to talk about, and this is going to be a doozy, is the 370Z fuel gauge can be wildly inaccurate. So this is a very, very large issue with the 370Z and some other Nissan models as well. But the 370Z fuel gauge is not reliable for many owners. The issue has been a problem for me personally since day one of ownership. So I'm going to say this as easily as possible. I do not count on the fuel gauge working 100% correctly all the time. I always fill up with gas weekly, so I don't find myself stranded without any. The problem is usually caused by a few different scenarios that unfortunately are hard for most people to correct themselves. It can feel like an intimidating fix, but actually it's not too bad if you have a little bit of wrench time. It requires you to basically pull out the fuel pump in your 370Z, but really it's not too bad of a fix to do yourself. A couple reasons why this may be happening is a malfunctioning fuel level sensor itself, so this also sits within the fuel tank, or the fuel basket, which actually holds your pump and this fuel level sensor, actually breaks apart inside your gas tank. So there's good news. There are aftermarket fixes for this issue, but most will rely on OEM fuel components. It's not a cheap fix, but it can be fixed for much less, if you decide to do it yourself, compared to what a dealership or a mechanic is going to charge you to fix it. since we're on the topic of fuel, thinking about taking a hard right turn, you might experience fuel starvation. So, in OEM form, the 370Z suffers from fuel starvation in hard right turns. Because of the shape of the fuel tank itself and the OEM components that are inside of it, chances are, if you're taking a hard right turn with, maybe less than a half full gas tank, you might experience fuel starvation. So there are, again, aftermarket solutions for this issue, but it's not cheap. So if you're already fixing an accurate fuel gauge, like what I had already mentioned, and have the fuel basket, pulled from your gas tank already, this would be a good project to take on if you want a track-capable 370Z. Otherwise, you might experience some troubles whenever you're trying to track your Z, especially in those hard turns. The 370Z platform itself is not a ready-to-go track platform. Okay, so next issue up is the 370Z experiences higher oil temperatures. So this is a pretty hot topic in the 370Z community. So I'm going to go ahead and tread tenderly here, not to ruffle too many feathers. The 370Z does, in my opinion, and many others, suffer from higher, than what you consider normal oil temperatures. So it has a little bit more volatility in the ranges of its oil temperatures. Normally, in my experience, the 370Z operates at right about 180 to 220 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on where you're at and your driving conditions. Keep in mind, I live in Houston, Texas, and we see a wide range of different weather here. That being said, I personally have seen a wide range of oil temperatures because of our crazy weather and just normal driving conditions. Personally speaking, I've never seen my oil temperatures above 230 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was under spirited driving conditions. However, if you want to, even take your stock Nismo 370Z on a track or longer spirited driving sprints, you'll most likely find yourself in limp mode because Nissan puts in an oil temperature safety guard that kills power for the car, and that kicks in at around 260 degrees Fahrenheit. So the good news is it won't leave you stranded, but unfortunately it could definitely put a damper on your driving plans as you allow for everything to kind of cool off. Also, really important to keep in mind is that if you have a pre-2012 Nissan 370Z, you don't have an oil cooler unless one has been installed in the aftermarket. And you might have even more difficulty with oil temperatures if you're not running an aftermarket oil cooler. The good news is that there are potential aftermarket solutions from Z1 Motorsports. Although I haven't purchased it yet, the Surtrab cooler with the oil sandwich plate adapter is supposed to be an excellent solution for Z owners just in general, for the 370Zs and the 350s. So if you want the most performance out of your Z, you should give it a consideration. All right, real fun one. The rear subframe bushing is known to fail. So this hits close to home, even though my 2014 Nismo 370Z has right around 40,000 miles currently. It's already blown out once before. That would be the rear subframe bushing. Before I owned my Z, the previous owner had already experienced this issue. So I bought my Z right around 20,000 miles. So it would have had to have been before 20,000 miles, the OEM bushing had already blown out. Thankfully, the previous owner fixed it. Unfortunately, fixed it with an aftermarket OEM styled bushing. So this was not a hard bushing. It's more or less kind of just reinstalling OEM. So it's bound to fail again. Nissan doesn't offer this part by itself if it fails. They force you to buy the entire rear subframe for this one bushing. Luckily, there are aftermarket solutions available for this very common problem on the 370Zs. Want to know if your car has a blown rear subframe bushing It's not too hard. Just stick your head underneath it. Usually, when they go out, they erupt like a volcano and spew goo all over the back of your rear differential cover. Swapping out this bushing is a major pain in the butt. Luckily, there are several higher performance aftermarket options for you that you can pick up. Once again, a real pain to replace yourself, but luckily the aftermarket has provided a cheap way of fixing this issue, but it is going to take some time. Okay, next up for my manual transmission friends. The manual transmission on the 370Z suffers from clutch slave cylinder, also known as CSCs, failures. So if you're interested in a manual transmission 370Z, you need to be aware of this issue. The manual 370Zs suffer from clutch slave cylinder failure, quite frequently. The issue is, unfortunate because it's very frequent. Ask any manual transmission 370Z owners. The chances are they might have already experienced it. Unfortunately, this part is not easy to get to, and one must actually remove the transmission to fix this issue. So, you're going to have to drop the transmission to actually get to this part to fix it. Luckily, there are better aftermarket solutions than what the OEM has provided available on the aftermarket. If you're replacing your clutch and your Z, this is optimal time to kill two birds with one stone. It's not a cheap fix, it's not an easy fix, and it's going to take some time. But if you take it to the dealership, prepare to be wowed because they're going to charge you an arm and a leg if you don't do it yourself. Okay, so since we're on the topic of the 6-speed manual transmissions, let's go ahead and go to the next issue, which is the clutch pedal feel. So the clutch pedal feel in the 6-speed manual transmissions for the 370Z are very commonly known for not being that great. This can cause a lower gear and reverse gear jerky driving condition. So although there may be a fair amount of total pedal movement, the engagement window of the clutch is extremely narrow. So luckily there is a fix for this, and it's free. I'm going to put a link above for a video I made about how to swap in a better clutch pedal spring that makes the narrow window much more manageable and driving a much smoother experience, generally speaking, for a manual transmission 370Z. Okay, next issue, the steering lock failure. So many early 370Zs, specifically the 2009 and 2010 models, suffer from steering wheel lock failures. So this part failure essentially strands you with your Z at probably the most inconvenient times. And unfortunately, it's very common to be a problem in the early 370Z years. So 2009, 2010, those being the main years. The good news is that although your dealership that you bought your car from may charge an arm and a leg to fix, I say that in quotes, your Z if this happens to you, there are some simple tutorials on how to make sure your 370Z never has this same problem. If you search 370Z steering wheel lock failure, you'll find many stories of 370Z owners that this has happened to. Replacement of the unit is just a temporary fix, as it's also prone to failure. So some more good news is that the do-it-yourself fix for this issue is super simple, and removal of the steering wheel lock fuse may only take 5 to 10 minutes of your time, and that is time well spent. That would be time well spent on your early year 370Z, and it will cost you nothing. Okay, so next on the list is foul throttle bodies and dirty map sensors. So both of these have been known to frequently put the 370Z into limp mode. Recently, I cleaned mine, and I'm putting a link up above to that video to save you a little bit of time and money. But I was surprised for having a relatively low mileage 370Z that my throttle bodies especially were covered in dirt and dust around its edges. causing all types of issues, mostly relating to how the computer kind of tries to compensate for that dirt. I personally had started noticing a lag in power and even experienced trouble starting more frequently leading up to my throttle body and MAF cleaning video. And after searching online, I found just how common this issue was. Luckily, it's a cheap fix if you use my video guide, but expect it to be a recurring issue, even if you're keeping your car stock. The issue can be exacerbated by installing aftermarket intakes, especially if they're over oiled. So cleaning yours every 30,000 to 50,000 miles may be a very real reality. Okay, so this last one is going to be a little bit funny, but definitely an issue with the 370Z. And that is the rear hatch springs and struts are unreliable and not capable. So this is a rather annoying one. That is, both opening and keeping open the rear hatch can be a little frustrating. Here's the deal. There's not enough help from the helper springs to pop open the rear hatch, and there really isn't enough strength to keep the hatch open whenever you have it open. So, how is this an issue? Well, if you have your hands full and you're trying to pop open your 370Z to put your stuff in the rear hatch multiple times, it can be really frustrating and inconvenient. And the hatch, even staying open once you lift it up, think about it. Imagine your head hanging underneath the hatch and a large gust of wind slams the hatch into your head. That happened to me personally whenever I was installing my subwoofer recently. This is a multiple times thing, very real. My hatch slammed shut so hard that I was worried about the glass breaking or damaging the glass of the on the actual hatch itself. So in a worst case scenario, think about it. Your hand is in the hatch area and it's slammed shut on it. It would be enough force to definitely break your hand, or even possibly worse if your head was in the way. Okay, so those are the common 10 issues with the 370Z that I have noticed since I became a 370Z owner. I hope you enjoyed the content and never have to deal with any of these problems yourself. I certainly still love my 370Z, as imperfect as it is, and recommend it as a fantastic head turner with all the right elements of a sports car that still checks all the right boxes when it comes to a very, very fun car. So that's it for today. Let me know if there's any questions or comments about the materials down below in the comments. And also, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.